I wonder if you might get me a rock hammer.
What? Half a mile.
This is the story of Andy Dufresne, a successful banker who is sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his wife and her lover. After the trial, he's sent to Shawshank Prison, a place no one has ever escaped from. Inside, there are inmates who have spent their entire lives behind bars. While the world outside has completely changed over time, the prison runs under strict rules, and any mistake or escape attempt is punished with brutal beatings.
Welcome to Shawshank.
When Andy first arrives, he keeps to himself and doesn't talk to anyone for a long time. One day, Andy meets a prisoner named Red, a man who can get almost anything from the outside into Shawshank. Red has already spent 20 years in prison.
I wonder if you might get me a rock hammer.
What?
Rock hammer's about 6 or 7 inches long.
Andy asks him for a small rock hammer and a large poster of an actress. Confused, Red jokes if Andy plans to tunnel out with that tiny hammer, but Andy simply tells him he'll understand once it arrives. Red also warns Andy about 3 inmates known as the Sisters.
Sisters have taken quite a liking to you.
I don't suppose it would help any if I explained to them I'm not homosexual.
Red explains that they don't care. At Andy's request, Red gets the hammer for him.
It will take a man about 600 years to tunnel under the wall with one of these.
In reality, Andy just enjoys carving rocks, which is why he wanted it. However, things take a dark turn as those 3 inmates begin targeting Andy, repeatedly assaulting him whenever they get the chance. This abuse continues for the next 2 years, and through it all, Andy never reports it or complains to anyone. Andy is often seen with bruises on his body and a strange, quiet expression on his face, showing the pain he never talks about. One day, a group of prisoners, including Red and Andy, are chosen to repair the prison roof under the supervision of Captain Hadley. Hadley is frustrated, complaining that his brother left him $30,000, but most of it will be taken by taxes. Hearing this, Andy approaches him and asks if he trusts his wife, which instantly angers Hadley, who grabs him and threatens to throw him off the roof. Before things go too far, Andy calmly explains that the law allows a man to gift up to $60,000 to his wife without paying any taxes. He offers to handle the paperwork for free, asking only that Hadley give each of his fellow inmates 3 beers in return. The next day, Andy's friends are seen relaxing on the rooftop, enjoying cold beers, proving that Andy kept his word. A few days later, the prisoners are gathered to watch a movie, but Andy steps out of the room. Outside, he is once again caught by the same 3 men who have been tormenting him. They drag him back into the projection room, intending to assault him again, continuing the cycle of abuse he has silently endured. When the attackers try to hurt him again, Andy finally fights back and strikes one of them on the head, but it only makes things worse. They brutally beat him, leaving him so badly injured that he ends up in the hospital for a month. Meanwhile, the man who attacked Andy is thrown into solitary confinement for a week. When Andy returns to his cell, the same officer whose tax problem he solved is there. Out of anger and cruelty, the officer beats that inmate so severely that he is left permanently crippled. A few days later, the warden comes to inspect Andy's cell, though it's really just an excuse to meet him after hearing how Andy saved that $30,000 in taxes. Andy is holding a Bible, which the warden takes, noting Andy's strong faith. The cell has photos of various actresses, including a large poster on the wall. The warden comments that while such things aren't usually allowed, he's willing to overlook them. Interestingly, he doesn't notice the small hammer Andy had asked Red to get.
I almost forgot. Salvation lies within.
Clearly impressed by Andy, the warden then invites him to his office. Andy is eventually assigned to work in the prison library as an assistant to an elderly inmate named Brooks, who has been managing it for years. Alongside this, Andy also begins helping the prison guards and staff by preparing their tax returns, which gradually increases his responsibilities. As time passes, Andy asks for extra help and brings his closest friend, Red, in as his assistant. Life moves on slowly inside Shawshank, until one day Brooks suddenly snaps and holds a knife to another inmate's throat. It turns out Brooks has just been granted parole after spending 50 years in prison, but he's terrified of the outside world. Shawshank has become his entire reality, and he believes that if he hurts someone, his sentence will be extended and he can stay. With calm words and reassurance, Andy and Red manage to convince Brooks to let the man go, preventing things from turning even worse. After Brooks is released, he struggles to adjust to the outside world. Everything has changed over the past 50 years. The roads are crowded with cars, life moves much faster, and he feels completely out of place. Unable to cope with this new reality, Brooks eventually takes his own life. Back in Shawshank, the warden introduces a new program called Inside Out.
Our inmates properly supervised, will be put to work outside these walls.
In reality, the warden uses this program to secure contracts and exploit cheap prison labor, making a huge profit through illegal means. Andy becomes deeply involved in managing this money, helping the warden cover it up by creating a fake identity named Randall Stevens. They funnel all the illegal earnings into accounts under this name. So if authorities ever investigate, they'll end up chasing someone who doesn't even exist. A new prisoner named Tommy arrives at Shawshank, a young man who has already been in and out of different prisons. When he hears about Andy helping inmates, he approaches him and says he wants to finish high school so he can build a better life for his wife and child after release. Andy agrees to help him. One day, Tommy asks Red why someone as intelligent as Andy is in prison, and Red tells him that Andy was convicted of murdering his wife and her lover, even though he was once a successful banker. Hearing this, Tommy is shaken, and soon after, he rushes to both Andy and Red with something important. He reveals that in a previous prison, he met an inmate who confessed to breaking into a house one night and shooting both the man and his wife, something that sounds exactly like the crime Andy was convicted for. Tommy's story reveals a shocking truth. The victims weren't a married couple, but lovers, and the woman was actually the wife of a wealthy banker. That banker was arrested and sentenced for their murders, meaning Andy was innocent all along. Realizing this, Andy goes straight to the warden and tells him, but the warden refuses to believe him on purpose. Andy is too valuable, as he's the one managing and laundering the warden's illegal money and knows all his secrets. Andy indirectly threatens that he could expose everything, which only makes the warden furious. As punishment, he throws Andy into solitary confinement for a month. At the same time, the warden eliminates the only witness who could prove Andy's innocence, Tommy. He has him shot and later lies, claiming Tommy was trying to escape. Andy sees through the lie and after being released from solitary tells the warden he will never help him again. In response, the warden coldly orders that Andy be sent back to the dungeon for another month, tightening his control over him. No one in Shawshank had ever been kept in solitary confinement for that long, but after spending 2 full months in the dungeon, Andy finally comes out. Red meets him, and Andy asks if he thinks he'll ever get out of prison. Red says maybe when he's old and his mind has slowed down. Andy then shares his dream of escaping to Zihuatanejo, a peaceful seaside town in Mexico, where he wants to start a small life, running a business, fixing boats by the ocean, and spending quiet days fishing in the deep sea. Hearing this, Red becomes uneasy and tells Andy that hope is dangerous because it can drive a man insane, urging him to stay grounded in reality. Andy calmly replies that he only has 2 choices left, either keep living suffocated inside or die. Before leaving, Andy makes Red promise that if he ever gets out, he'll go to a place called Buxton, find a large tree in a wide field, and look for a black stone near a wall where something important is buried underneath. Red makes Andy promise that if he ever gets out, he will go to that tree in Buxton. When Red asks what's hidden under the stone, Andy simply tells him he'll have to find out himself. After that, Andy calmly goes to finish the warden's work, organizing all the financial documents and placing them safely inside a locked box. Once everything is done, the warden hands Andy his clothes and orders him to have them neatly pressed, with his shoes polished to a mirror shine. Later that night, Andy returns to his cell while Red feels deeply uneasy, worried that Andy might do something drastic. The next morning, when the prison cells are opened, Andy doesn't come out. A guard walks up to check his cell and is left completely stunned. At the same time, the warden reaches for his shoes, only to realize the pair in the box isn't his, it's Andy's. Suddenly, a loud siren blares across Shawshank, signaling something that has never happened before. A prisoner has escaped. The warden storms into Andy's cell, calling Red in as well, and angrily demands to know where Andy is. Red calmly replies that he has no idea, which only fuels the warden's rage. Frustrated, he shouts that Andy must have vanished like a ghost, leaving behind nothing but a few stones and a poster on the wall. In anger, he starts throwing rocks at the poster, but something strange happens. The stone doesn't bounce back, it passes right through. When the warden tears the poster down and reaches inside, he discovers a massive tunnel hidden behind it. Everyone is stunned because the prison walls are incredibly thick, and digging through them without machinery should have been impossible. Yet Andy managed to do exactly that, slowly carving his way to freedom over the years. The guards rush to the exit point of the tunnel, where they find Andy's old prison clothes, along with a bar of soap, a comb, and the same small rock hammer he got from Red nearly 20 years ago. That small rock hammer Andy got from Red years ago was the key to everything. He had been patiently digging through the wall of his cell for nearly 20 years. To avoid suspicion, he would hide the loose dirt in his pocket pockets and scatter it across the prison yard, little by little. Before his escape, Andy also secretly took all the documents related to the warden's illegal money and hid them inside the Bible, placing it back in the warden's safe without him realizing. Using the opportunity when the warden gave him clothes to press, Andy kept them for himself, along with the polished shoes, preparing for his escape. That night, once the prison lights went out, Andy crawled through the tunnel he had carved over decades. At the end, he broke into a sewage pipe and crawled through it, traveling a distance as long as 5 football fields, before finally breaking free into the open. From a prison where no one had ever escaped, Andy Dufresne did the impossible. The next morning, he reaches the bank where the warden's black money is stored, ready to take his next step toward freedom. The money Andy goes after is all stored under the fake identity he created, someone who doesn't even exist. From inside prison, Andy had been signing documents under that name and carefully building complete legal records for it. Now free, he walks into the bank and withdraws the entire amount, nearly $2.95 million, making him not just free but incredibly wealthy. At the same time, Andy sends all the evidence of the warden's illegal dealings to the press. The next morning, the story explodes in the newspapers. When the warden opens his safe instead of his documents, he finds Andy's Bible. Inside, a message reads, "You were right. Salvation lies within." As he flips through the pages, he notices a hollowed-out section shaped like a hammer. That's where Andy had hidden the rock hammer all along, even back when the warden first inspected his cell years ago and briefly held that same Bible. Now, with the truth fully exposed and the police closing in, the warden realizes there's no escape left for him, and before he can be arrested, he takes his own life. Sometime later, Red is finally granted parole. He steps out into the world after spending nearly 40 years in prison, but freedom doesn't feel right to him. Everything seems unfamiliar, and he struggles to find meaning in this new life. He even ends up living in the same room where Brooks once stayed. And just like Brooks, Red begins to feel hopeless, thinking about ending his life. But then he remembers the promise he made to Andy. Holding on to that promise, Red travels to the open field Andy told him about, where he finds the large tree and the stone wall nearby. Beneath a black stone, he discovers a small box. Inside, there's some money and a letter from Andy. In the letter, Andy reminds him of the place he once spoke about in prison, bringing back a sense of hope that Red had almost lost. Red reads the letter and softly says the name Andy once told him, Zihuatanejo. In the letter, Andy invites him there, saying he's been waiting for him. He also writes, "Hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies." Holding on to those words, Red finally chooses hope. He travels all the way to the Mexican coast, and when he reaches the shore, he sees Andy, free at last, working on his boat, just like he had dreamed back in prison. Everything Andy once imagined has come true. The same hope Red once called dangerous is what carried Andy through 20 years of struggle, helping him achieve the impossible and build the life he wanted. The Shawshank Redemption remains one of Hollywood's most celebrated films, holding an outstanding 9.3 rating on IMDb.